Praise the great name of our King, our Messiah. It's always a wonderful thing to give him praise and to honor him, to worship him with our lips, with our hands, with our praises, with all of the ways in which we worship the King. Bless the Holy One. More importantly, it's best that we worship him with our lives. Worship unto the Father is not just something that we do when we gather, but it's something we do with our lives. Bless the Almighty. The Hebrew term for the word worship, adovah, is also the same term used with reference to prayer. It's an idea or a concept that has to do with service. Our worship, our service, everything we do unto the Most High is a worship to him. So worship is not something that we do when we offer up a praise with our lips, or when we bend our knees and bow our heads down to the ground. But worship is something we do in how we live each day, how we order our lives, in our interactions with other people, how we treat one another, how we treat the stranger, how we treat our enemies, even the service we perform at places where we work or volunteer. All of that is a part of our worship to the Almighty. Scripture teaches that for those who work and are employed, it says that you work as unto Yahshua. And so everything that we do in our lives, it is a part of our worship. We cannot separate the activity of our lives from worship and honoring the King. So oftentimes we find this to be the case in the Western world and mindset in which we live, especially which in much of modern Christianity, where we have this idea that we come to the place of worship to get our worship in, and then once we leave, we're back to the regular routine of life, doing our own thing, as most would call it. But from a biblical Hebrew perspective and understanding, you cannot separate or compartmentalize worship and living your own life. That's a Western cultural ideology and perspective. And most of us in this Western world in which we live are completely unaware that we live that way. Those who live in the Mediterranean and those who have more of what I guess the world will call a Semitic cultural way of doing things, they understand that the life that a person lives has the Most High interrelated into every part of it, every function of it. And we find that idea really seen is in the Islamic world, but before Islam came into existence, the Hebraic concept of life was such that there is no compartmentalization. There is no, here's my life here, here's my spiritual life, here's my natural life. And so you break up all of the different areas of a person's life. In other words, you have folks putting on different hats for each aspect of their life, and they're like three different people. They have their personal life, which is their private life behind closed doors, and here's their natural life and their interactions with other people, and then here's their spiritual life, and all of them are separate and distinct. And what we fail to realize is that from the original Hebraic understanding of living, the Most High is incorporated, and I don't even like to use the word incorporated. That's not really the best term to use, because the way in which we're supposed to live is that our life is built around the word of Elohim. That is how the Hebrew Israelite, Messianic Hebrew Israelite lives their life. Your life is built around the word of Elohim, which means that in everything you do, as the Apostle Paul said, you do as unto Yahshua and to his glory.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so it is important that we understand worship is a lifestyle.
Yes,
So oftentimes when we gather together and we experience the spiritual presence of the Almighty in the singing and in the worship and in the playing of the instruments, because we do believe that the Almighty is involved in all of that, that the invisible atmosphere of his presence is here in the midst of all of that. But more importantly, we need to be mindful of the fact that while we may experience that, yet when we live our lives obediently to him, there is a Shekinah. Some people like to call that Shekinah, but it's Shekinah, that is the glory presence of the Almighty that covers and hovers around us when we go about our day-to-day lives. And as we continue to live obediently before him, he works things out on our behalf because of his presence that's there. His presence used to be like that around the world in certain places until wickedness, of course, continued to dominate the world. But what we need to understand is that our life is a lifestyle of worship. We cannot separate our obedience to the Most High from our natural life. So what am I saying? I'm saying that we who are believers, who have become Hebrews, every believer in the Messiah needs to understand that they are a Hebrew Israelite. What that means is that as a Hebrew, you have crossed over from death to life. You have crossed over from the world to the kingdom of the Most High. You have crossed over from paganism and to the worship and the exaltation in life that the Creator ordained for man. And as an Israelite, you have been brought into the house of Israel, who is the only people of Elohim upon the earth. And everyone who believes and receives Yahshua the Messiah, as the Apostle Paul said to those who were of the other nations, he said that you have been grafted in. And he said that the root bears you, you don't bear the root. And so the Most High has opened the door for the whole human race to become Israelites. So, well, what's an Israelite? An Israelite is one who rules with the Messiah, one who rules with Elohim. Yahshua has revealed to us that Yisrael really points to Yahshua, our Messiah, because he rules and reigns with the Father. That's what the name Yisrael means. And we who are in the Messiah, we are also in the house of Yisrael. And so let's be mindful of those things. And I know it's some new insight for some, but for those who understand this truth, let us walk in it and let us continue to love our King. Blessed be he. Let's get right into the scriptures here. We're continuing in the book of Matthew 26 chapter. Matthew chapter 26. And we're going to pick up at the 69th verse. I'm going to pick up at the 69th verse, and we're going to read through to the end of the chapter. This little section that we're reading here has to do with Peter and his response when he was approached by those who said something about his connection with the Messiah, something that Yahshua said would take place. Beginning at the 69th verse, Matthew chapter 26. Now Peter sat outside in the palace, and a damsel came to him, saying, "You also was with Yahshua of Galilee." But he denied before them all, saying, "I know not what you are saying." In other words, I don't know what you're talking about. And when he was gone out into the porch, another saw him and said to them that were there, "This fellow was also with Yahshua of Nazareth." And again he denied with an oath, "I do not know the man." Wow. He wanted to really make sure that they would be convinced that he did not know them. He said, "I swear, I don't know him." And after a while came to him they that stood by and said to Peter, "Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you." Then began he to curse and to swear, oh my, saying, "I know not the man." And immediately the cock crew. And Peter remembered the word of Yahshua, which said to him, "Before the cock crow, you shall deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. Father, we do bless you for the opportunity to teach the scriptures today, again on another Sabbath. We ask you, Father, that you would give us wisdom and insight to share regarding this situation that the Apostle Peter found himself in due to a time of being despondent, confused, resulting as to the things that were about to befall his Messiah, Yahshua, our King. I pray, Father, that you would give insight and cause us to understand the great grace that you have upon us, knowing that though we might fail, yet there is restoration. We thank you in the mighty name of Yahshua. Amen. Well, we find a situation in which Peter had to swallow his own words. Peter was always a man that was one with a ready response. He appears to be a rather outspoken, to the point, strong individual. And before this situation came up, while they were having the Passover meal and Messiah was telling the disciples, "One of y'all is going to betray me," and they all began to question among themselves, saying, "Well, is it I? Who is it going to be? Is it I? You know, they were asking amongst themselves and asking Messiah himself. And Peter, he just was forthright and he said, no, I won't betray you. I won't betray you, and I'm not going to leave you. Messiah said, not only y'all going to betray me, he said, but every last one of you are going to leave me. Peter stood up and he says, I'll never leave you. I'll die with you. And you know, it appears that when the religious leaders sent their officers to arrest Messiah, that Peter actively began to demonstrate his courage, that he would stand with Messiah, that he would fight. But when Messiah told him, look, don't fight, put your sword back in its sheath, he realized then and there that there was nothing that he could do. And surely he began to wonder whether or not Yahshua was even the one. Now, I know the scriptures don't tell us that he had doubts about Messiah being the anointed one. I mean, after all, Peter was the one who first verbally acknowledged that Yahshua was the Messiah. When they were over at Caesarea Philippi, and Messiah asked him, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And they said, well, some say that you're one of the old prophets. Some say that you're that Eliah that's supposed to come. Some say you're John the Baptist. And then he asked, he said, well, but who do you say that I am? And Peter said, you are the Messiah, Ben Elohim, Son of God. That's what he said. He was the first to give a verbal acknowledgement that Yahshua was the Messiah. So here it is now. Messiah is arrested. He's taken. He's at the council before the Sanhedrin. They just condemned him and said, look, we don't have any need for any more witnesses. He's already blasphemed by indirectly saying that he's going to be the one coming in glory. So he's already claiming to be God. He's claiming to be Yahshua. So listen, we're going to go ahead and judge him now. So what is the judgment? And they said the judgment is death. So Peter, seeing all of this, I mean, you know, all of this is happening all at one time. It's just been a matter of hours since Peter went from saying, I'm going to die with you, I'll fight for you, I will never leave you, to him now being one of the ones that had scattered, kind of hiding out. He's there in the temple area, kind of hiding out because they were at the palace of the high priest. And so he's kind of in hiding, you know, just kind of quietly checking out what's going on. And after they made their verdict, he leaves out. Now, Messiah had already said, Peter, look, I know you mean well. You know, this is my own, you know, way of saying it. I'm just adding in a little bit of what I think. But Messiah, no doubt, probably said, you know, I know you mean well, Peter, but listen, you're going to deny me 3 times and then the rooster's going to crow. He said, I know inside of you right now, you probably feel as though you're going to hang with me all the way to the end. But it's not going to turn out that way. I already foresaw what you're going to do. I already foresaw what your response is going to be. And Peter probably said, no, Master, no. So now, after Peter's observing this whole situation, knowing that Messiah was not doing anything to deliver himself, he decided, I'm done. If I stay around and try to do something, then they'll arrest me. It's interesting what happens when a person begins to lose their faith. See, he had been following Messiah for a good amount of time, roughly for about 3 years. He saw the miracles. He saw him turn all kind of situations around. He saw him feed over 5,000 plus women and children, which were probably roughly 10,000 people on 2 occasions. He saw the dead raised. He saw limbs that were deformed straighten out. He saw people that were possessed with evil spirits free from those evil spirits. There's a lot of stuff that Peter saw. Not only did Peter observe these things in mighty acts and power, but on a missionary run that Yahshua gave to his disciples, Peter also was involved in experiencing the demonstration of the power of the Spirit through the use of the name of Yahshua. Yahshua said, go into the cities of Israel. Don't take anything with you. Just depend upon those whose homes you come to receive you in, and preach the good news of the kingdom to them. Heal the sick, cast out devils. He told them to do these mighty acts. And when they went forth, they did these things. And they were so excited about the power that they themselves were involved in, because at once they were seeing Messiah lay hands on the sick. But now they were laying hands on the sick, and the sick were recovering. They were casting out devils. So Peter had some firsthand experience himself with the power of the Most High. But now at this stage, he's seeing his king taken and didn't do a thing about it. I think it shook Peter. I believe it shook his faith. There's nothing worse than a person whose faith has been shaken. You can experience and see the miracles and power of the Most High and demonstrations and signs and wonders, but even though seeing all of that, your faith can still be shaken. Peter saw it all. Peter was one of the ones who went up to the mountain and watched Yahshua actually become transformed. And he saw Moses and Eliah right there on the mountain. He actually heard the voice of the Father speaking, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." He saw all of this. He wasn't some novice. He wasn't some wet behind the ear. He had firsthand experience and knowledge with the power and the glory. Talking about Peter here. But his faith was shaken. I would think someone who would have firsthand knowledge and experience with the divine wrapped in human flesh, I would think that nothing would shake him. You know, we human beings, we like to take stock in evidences of the supernatural. We have this mindset that if I could just see a miracle, I would believe. If I could see someone really be raised from the dead, I believe. If I could really see the sick healed, if I saw it for myself, then I would believe. There's some of us who feel like that if we experience all of these things, that nothing would ever shake our faith. Well, Peter, he not only saw it, but he was an active participant in the process of the miracles, the signs, and the wonders. Yet his faith was shaken. And I would have to assume that the reason why his faith was shaken was because his understanding of the purpose of Messiah had not yet been clarified in himself. He recognized that Yahshua was Messiah. And Yahshua confirmed that recognition. Yahshua said to Peter after he had made his statement, he said that flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father which is in heaven. He confirmed it. He said, the Father gave you this insight. He gave you this revelation, Peter, and I'm excited about it. But even though we might have revelation about things, as Peter had revelation about who Yahshua was when he came, and that he is the anointed king, yet when you don't have insight regarding some of the other obscure things about the plans and the purpose of the Almighty. So you know how we human beings are. We feel like we got to know everything. I got to know all the ins and outs about what's going on. And if it don't quite fit my understanding, if it don't quite seem to go according to the plan that I have in my mind about it, then maybe, just maybe, all of this wasn't what it was supposed to be cracked up to be. Maybe, I'm trying to get in Peter's head as he's seeing all of this. Just maybe there might be something questionable about this Yahshua. There was nothing that Messiah hid from Peter or the other disciples. Messiah told the disciples, this is what's going to happen. A few days before Passover arrived, he told them exactly what was going to happen. He said, in a couple of days is going to be the Passover. He said, the chief priests and the scribes and elders, they're going to arrest me. I'm going to be taken by the hands of sinful men, crucified, and in 3 days I'm going to rise again. And obviously, the disciples had a difficult time with accepting what Messiah told them because he had to tell them a number of times again. He didn't just tell them once, he told them a couple more times. Even on Passover day. Peter could not get around the fact that Messiah had to die. You know, have you ever had such a teaching or an idea ingrained in your mind from childhood? A lot of things we learn in our childhood, they stick with us even in our adult life, and they affect us so that if we have a situation where a certain idea or concept that we have learned as a child is challenged, we immediately begin to get on the defense without knowing it. Because it is such a part of who we are that it is difficult to shake the concept from us. And some things we have been raised to think and believe are not even according to the word of Elohim at all. Some ideas that we have been taught to embrace have nothing to do with the purposes of the Most High at all. But because we have embraced them and we have attached them, and mama told us about it and daddy told us about it, and their mama and their daddy told them about it, we somewhere in our psyche believe that it must be so. These Israelites during that time had been told from generation to generation that when the Messiah would come, that he would deliver the people of Israel from the surrounding nations and establish his throne and seat of authority in Jerusalem and overthrow all the kingdoms of the earth. So when Messiah tells them, look, I'm going to die and I'm going to be buried, and after 3 days I'm going to rise again, that just did not set well in their psyche. That's how I see it. It didn't set well in Peter's mind. It's like, I just confessed, Peter said, I just confessed that Yahshua is the Messiah. And now the one that I've confessed is the Messiah is telling me that he's going to die. Death and the Messiah don't mix. At least not in Peter's mind and the mind of the disciples. That don't mix. And you know how it is, we can be told something. But when we are told something and it comes in conflict with an idea, a concept, or a belief that we have, it takes a while for that thing to be rooted up out of us. Sometimes we say, well, if it was me and I was living in that time, I would have just believed what Yahshua said. No, you wouldn't have. The way we live life today, there's so many things that we believe and that we hold on to that have nothing to do with the things of God, and we judge ourselves by it as though the Father is going to somehow judge us because of how we believe and see something. And much of the time it's because we've had teaching that has been given to us that is not based upon the sound writings of the scriptures. And when we embrace a concept and we have that concept reinforced by those that we know, those that have come before us, we obviously then begin to believe that, well, it must be right. Mama did it. Daddy did it. My pastor did it. His pastor did it. The bishop, the apostle believed it. So quite obviously it must be right. And when you hear something different than what you are accustomed to hearing, it takes a while before it settles in. And see, when the disciples heard what Messiah told them, they didn't just take that with a grain of salt and said, all right, good. We'll just wait for you to get up from the grave after they crucify you. No. They didn't know what the outcome was going to be. See, when you have your whole belief system, certain core things in your belief system, all of a sudden tossed up in the air, you really begin to wonder whether the whole belief system that you've been trusting in all your life has any foundation to it. I mean, this can really mess somebody up. This is true. That's why sometimes when we begin to teach people and tell them about the original messianic faith, and we tell them that there was some stuff that happened in between the first century up until the present era. And we try to teach people that a lot of this stuff that we who call ourselves believers in the Messiah or in Christ that we do in certain celebrations, such as the Easter thing and the putting up the Christmas tree thing, we don't understand that that was something that came along a couple hundred years downstream by a pagan mix in the church with the Catholic system in Rome. And when you begin to tell people about some of these things that they've been, taught as children to embrace and believe, it's hard for them to break away from it. They say, wait, what do you mean? This is not a part of my faith? No. It has nothing to do with it. It wasn't a part of what Yahshua and the apostles practiced. It's a pagan mix. And see, I know that might not be the closest example to provide, But the stuff that Yahshua was talking about was coming into direct conflict with the understanding that Peter had about the Messiah. Peter didn't have an understanding about the Messiah coming to die on a cross, to be crucified. I mean, listen, when a person is crucified, they are now viewed as a curse. See, curse and Messiah don't connect. They knew what was going to happen to Messiah should he be sentenced to death. They knew that once they found him guilty, he was going to be crucified. And once crucified, you can no longer attach the title of Messiah to that, because the crucifixion of an individual put one as now being labeled as a cursed person. He's now cursed. They couldn't mix them concepts together. Messiah brought this concept that the suffering servant that Isaiah had prophesied that would take the sins of the people is also the same one who will be the king and ruler over the people of Israel and those who join themselves to Israel. They couldn't see that. That was difficult for Peter to embrace. It was difficult for Peter to wrap around his mind. And so what did Peter do when he was confronted by the young damsel, the young girl that saw him and said, wait a minute, you look familiar, dude. You were with Yahshua from the Galilee region. And then another little girl caught him somewhere, saw him around it, and said to him, yeah, he was with Yahshua from Nazareth. What does Peter do? He denies both of those statements. He said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. That's what he said the first one. Then the next one he said, no, look, I swear, I don't know him. I don't have no connection with him. And then all of a sudden, some of the other folk, guess they was probably hearing what was happening. They look at him and they say, yeah, you were with them. You know why? You up here lying, you up here saying that you're not with them, but your speech gives you away. See, why did his speech give him away? And here's where we need to understand that Yahshua and the disciples were from northern Israel, in a region called the Galilee. And in that region called the Galilee, while they spoke Hebrew in that area, just like everyone else in the land of Israel spoke Hebrew, the Israelite culture that they developed amongst themselves was unique to their community. They didn't sound like the Israelite down in the southern part of Israel, down in Jerusalem. We can equate that the same way as like here we all live in the United States of America. And now I'm from California, living up here in Washington now. But those of us that are from California, when we talk, our lingo is a little different from someone that's from New York. And someone who is from the South, whether it's in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, those areas, their way of speaking with their what you call Southern drawl identifies them of living in that region of the United States. So if you hear someone that comes over here to Washington, since I'm here in Washington, and they're from New York, and they'll begin to start speaking, you'll automatically know that you're not from here. No, I understand we speak the same language, English, but the way you say it, the way you pronounce it is a little different than the way I pronounce it. So where I would say, well, seeing that I'm familiar with how people from New York and some of those other areas on the East Coast may sound, I'll be able to readily identify, oh, you're from New York, right? Okay. Same situation here with those who were from northern Israel in the Galilee area. Nazareth was a city in what's called the Galilee region, northern Israel. It was a little ways away from Jerusalem, which was in southern Israel. So when Peter opened his mouth, it gave him away. He said, look, you're not one of the homies here in Jerusalem. You might have relatives down here. We understand that. We all have relatives that are kind of scattered all over Israel, but you're not from here. And if they wanted to get even more descriptive, they probably would have looked at his clothes and said, man, look at how you dress. Even sometimes the very clothes that a person wears can give away where they are from. You know how it is. They said, yeah, we know you were with Yahshua. The way you talked and giving yourself away, you sound like one of them northerners up there in the Galilee, hanging around all them Gentiles. They didn't really have nothing too well to say about people that lived up in northern Israel because they lived so close to those who were of the other nations. They were kind of like on what you might call the fringes, if I might say that, of Israel, and were real close to people who lived lives that were in contradiction to Torah. They really didn't have anything good to say about those that lived up in northern Israel. Matter of fact, when Yahshua was beginning his ministry and he had gotten down there into the area in Jerusalem, and they said, well, he's from Nazareth. And they said, well, what good thing can come out of Nazareth? He ain't have nothing good to say about that area. So they identified Peter. Peter couldn't lie his way out. And then finally, as you know, the sun's about to come up. Because all this stuff has been happening since somewhere probably round about midnight. I don't know when Messiah was taken and arrested, but we know it was sometime between possibly what we call maybe 10 o'clock at night till the early hours of the morning. But the scripture says that the cock began to crow. The rooster crowed, and Peter had denied Messiah 3 times. And when Peter heard that rooster crowing as the sun was coming up, he realized the words of Messiah. He remembered what Yahshua said to him hours ago. He remembered. Yahshua said, you're going to deny me 3 times before the cock crowed. And all of that at that moment drove him to tears and weeping because he realized he had failed the one that he had so loved. Sometimes things happen to us when we're going through circumstances that we just cannot put our finger on. We just cannot wrap around our brains. We just cannot fix it on our own. We're human beings. We have this thing about us where we feel like we can fix every problem in our life. We feel like things are not supposed to go this way. Things are supposed to be okay all the time. We're supposed to be blessed and flourishing all the time. But the Most High has a way of letting us know that everything is not going to go according to your plan. Everything's not going to go according to your agenda. Everything is not going to go according to how you had it all fixed up in your mind since you was 5, 6, 7, 10, and how whatever age it is, you have all these dreams about how things are going to be. The Most High has a way of letting you know things will not always go the way you think it should be. But that does not mean that the Most High is not in control. He wants us to understand that sometimes things can be tossed upside down. Things can look like it's dead and buried. Things can look like it's never going to work out. Things can look like it's always going to be messed up. But the Most High is still in control. We might not understand everything that may be going on. We might not understand why things don't go the way we wanted them to go. We might get a little piece of revelation about the plan of the Most High for our lives. And then when we start to look at the outcome of how things are going, we begin to question, well, Father, did you really mean that about me? Well, Father, did you really say that about me? Well, Father, are you going to do that you said about me? Why? Because we don't understand the circumstances that we may be going through in the right now or the past. And we might say, well, why it seem like it's taking so long for you to fix it? See, we don't always know the fullness of the plan when we have bits and pieces of the information given to us. We have this expectation of how we see something's going to be, and the Father wants us to know that just because you don't see it the way you think it ought to be, it doesn't mean that it has slipped out of the control of my hands. I'm sure Joseph, one of the sons of Jacob, when he had those dreams about himself being exalted and ruling over his brothers, he probably did not take into account that he was going to be lied upon, taken into slavery. Then when he had some favor in his life while he was in slavery, because of the lustful wife of his master Potiphar, she wanted to get busy with him sexually, and he said no. He left out, and she lied on him and said he tried to come at me. You know, he was put in prison for a number of years, lied upon, suffered while being innocent. Most High still gives the brother some favor because he was able to interpret dreams. And he tells the man whose dream he interpreted, when you leave, man, look, don't forget about me. You know? Whew. The baker forgot about him. It wasn't up until Pharaoh had a dream and needed somebody that knew how to bring an interpretation. And then the baker said, you know, I know somebody. And they pull him out. It took a long time before Joseph actually experienced and saw what he had been given as a dream in his mind when he was a teenager. Many times the things that we hold on to and that we envision in our mind, that the Most High no doubt drops in our spirit, because we impatient and because we go through and because it don't look like it's supposed to be. You know, Peter couldn't understand all of that. Look, man, here I am at the height of prophetic history. Our ancestors had been talking about this Messiah, this King that's to come for centuries, and here we are with him at the height of it. He's here with us. I mean, can't you see in his mind how much of an exciting time that was for Peter? I mean, this was the moment of the ages. This wasn't just something that was a fly-by-night deal. This was the moment of the ages. And they were already dealing with oppression from the Romans. And I'm sure they couldn't shake themselves from wanting to see that to be eliminated. That was something that was number one on the list. Messiah's here. You're going to deal with these folk because, look, they making our life miserable here. So for him to talk about, I'm going to die, you mean to tell me you're not going to deal with the Romans? You're not going to be king? Come on. I mean, we who read the scriptures and live on this side of the resurrection, we seeing everything in hindsight and talking about how much we love the Messiah and all of this, and fail to realize that the people during that time were dealing with some real significant, horrifying things by being oppressed by the Romans. So salvation ain't just something that happens to your spirit. Salvation is something that radically changes your whole life, and that's what they wanted to experience. They didn't just want to be saved and be in fellowship with God, where their spirits now commune with God, their sins have been washed away. They wanted some physical deliverance from the Most High and be out of their oppression. And the Most High wants that too for his people, and has promised that for his people. It's not something that he has forgotten about for us. It's been prophesied by the prophets, but it was not yet time for that physical deliverance. And that's what Peter couldn't reconcile in his mind during those moments. It was like the climax of prophetic history. He's here. The one Daniel prophesied about, he's here. The one our father Yaakov, Yisrael, prophesied that would come, that the scepter would not depart from Yahudah, neither the giver of the law from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall the gathering of the people be. The one Micah talked about, where Micah said that he was going to come from Bethlehem out of Judah, though it's smallest among all of the tribes and clans of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth he that's to rule my people, Yisrael. All of these prophets prophesied about him. The prophet Malachi said that I'm going to send my messenger. He said, and he will come, even the messenger of the covenant, to his temple. All of these prophets prophesied about him. And here he is at the climax of prophetic history. Climax of it. And yet, he does nothing to deliver himself, nor change the existing conditions of oppression that came upon those Israelites in Judah and all of the land of Israel by the Romans. You see, I think in Peter's mind, it was hard for him to wrap his mind around it. But he was not without a clear word of what the plan of the Most High was. Messiah told him, this is the plan of the Most High. And sometimes in our life, it's difficult for us to deal with the plan of the Most High when he makes it known to us. Because in our heads, we have something else. See, we human beings need to quit trying to mix our agenda with the plan of the Most High. When you mix your agenda with the plan of the Most High, you'll be disappointed every time. And you'll be walking around wondering why things aren't working the way they should work, because the Most High is not operating based upon your agenda or my agenda about how life's supposed to be for you and me. He has his own agenda. He has his own plan. He has his own way. And he's working it out according to his sovereign will and authority. He's doing it his own way. And what will help us as people of the Most High is to learn to accept the plan of Elohim. Some of us can't accept the plan of Elohim because it doesn't fit with our belief system about him. Some of us can't accept the plan of Elohim because it causes us to change, and change is uncomfortable. Some of us have a difficult time with accepting the plan of Elohim because sometimes the plan of Elohim, when you live in obedience and you accept the prophecy of what the word has said, will cause you to have to redirect yourself from where you once were walking in. That's difficult for us to do. Sometimes it's hard because we might have to say we're wrong when we thought we were right so often, so many times. But if we're going to have shalom in our life, we have to come to terms with the plan of the Most High. See, right now, as the people of the Most High, we only see in part. That's what the Apostle Paul said. He said, when you prophesy, he said, you prophesy in part. What that means is that you only know bits and pieces of the complete plan. You don't know the complete plan. You might only have a few scenes out of the whole movie, but you don't know the whole movie. And we're trying to figure out the whole movie based upon these few scenes, when the Most High's purpose is much larger than what our perspective is. And I believe the Father purposefully does that because he doesn't want us to get so concerned about knowing the whole plan and seeing the whole picture as he is concerned about us being obedient to him. Someone might ask, and I'm about to wrap this up, someone might ask, well, what is the most important thing to the Most High? We know salvation is the most important thing for individuals to come into, but once you are saved, what is the most important thing? Obedience to his word. Scriptures teach us over in the book of Isaiah, latter part of that book, statements made. Who is it to whom Yahshua looks at? He that has a contrite heart, broken spirit, and who trembles at my word. What is most important to the Most High? Our obedience to him. It's not how well we preach. It's not how well we teach. It's not about how much we can perform a service to the poor and the needy. It's not how well we can accurately prophesy or be able to see in the spirit. And all of those things have their places to help bring encouragement and insight and direction for the individual lives of people and the collective body of the congregation. But what is most important to the Almighty is our obedience to him. That's what's most important to him. Because all of this is so that men may be connected with the Creator and walk in his ways and keep his precepts. You can't rightly have relationship with the Father, the Creator, and walk with him if you're in contradiction to his ways. Because the ways of the Almighty is what he actually performs and acts out himself. How can you walk with him if you refuse to accept the fact that he calls you and I to be like him. Therefore, what is the most important thing? Our obedience. And many times we're challenged in those areas of accepting the purposes of the Father. Just as Peter had to accept the purpose of the Most High, that our Messiah would die, we also need to accept the complete purposes of the Most High in his word and do exactly what it says if we're to be blessed and to experience the fullness of life in our King. I close on that note. Let us stand.